All right, can you hear me now? Anybody? I'm gonna wait until comments come in. I just tried changing out my sound. Went to a different microphone. So let's see. If you hear me and everything comes out okay, let me know in the, okay, awesome. We have sound. Great, okay. Thank you guys. Good thing I have the comments on so I can see it instead of being muted the whole time. Okay, so since you all didn't hear a word that I was saying a moment ago, let's backtrack. Welcome. So glad that you all are here. I'm really excited to talk about logo variations and how they can really give you more versatility when you're going to design collateral items and everything else that you need for your business. But let me backtrack. What is Ellechat in the first place? For those of you who are new, Ellechat is a once a week webinar on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about topics that will help you grow your business. Lately, we've been focusing a lot on design. That's what my background is in. But next week, we're going to be talking about mailing lists, and we've talked about blogging and everything under the sun. So this is a time for you to join in and learn tips and strategies to grow your business. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Lauren Hooker, and I'm the graphic designer behind Ellen Company. I actually have a BFA in visual communication design, and I've had my business the last 2 years. I've worked with over 40 creative entrepreneurs on the design of their brands and websites. I have over 250 people on a waiting list, which is crazy. And so it's been really fun to not only use design to help my own business, but to help other people grow theirs. So this topic really resonates with me. Before I jump into the lesson, because I'm really excited to get started on it, I want you to call attention to the Q&A portion of the screen. So if you have any questions, I know that some of you have already started asking some really awesome questions. Feel free to leave the questions in there. You can vote up questions. So if you really want to see one answered, go ahead and vote it up. And I'll answer it in order of the votes. Feel free to leave comments. It seems like you all found that when you're telling me you couldn't hear me. And I also have a poll, and I asked, how did you develop your current logo? Did you design it yourself? Did you work with a designer? Or did you purchase it from a site like Creative Market or Etsy? It seems like the vast majority of you designed it yourself, which is super impressive. And if that's the case, then you'll have no trouble creating alternative logos. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in and start sharing my screen with you all. Bear with me for 1 second while you have tunnel vision. All right, here we go. So I want to start with a quick question. How much versatility is your current logo giving you at the moment? And you can leave your answer in the comments, or you can just think to yourself, how much versatility is your current logo giving you at the moment? Do you have one logo and you find that because it's in a horizontal format, it really doesn't work well in a square or a circle? Are you having trouble making all of your logo variations look consistent if you have come up with some different logo variations? How much versatility do you have when you go to put your logo on collateral items? So I want to give you an example of a client that I worked with this past year, Amanda Jameson, and she is a wedding photographer. I want to show you how we were able to create consistent logo variations for her business. So if you look over here to the left, that is her primary logo. That is the main logo that she can use on collateral items on her website. That's the one you'll usually see pop up in some places. But because it's more vertical in format, it's really hard when you go to use it in places where you need a horizontal format. So it's really hard if you were to put it on the bottom of a contract. If you just wanted it to be inconspicuous and downsize it, the vertical format might be hard to accommodate in those instances. So we simply moved this pretty A letter mark there next to the text, and then we had a more horizontal format. And then we could also take this A itself and use it on its own, or we could take this this word mark from her logo and use it on its own. And we also came up with one more variation here. So you can see how by using the same elements of the logo. We didn't add anything to it, but we were able to break apart the different elements so that when we went to place it on collateral items, it fit well. So for example, these are Amanda's business cards. And you can see that we use the primary logo on the front. It worked really well for the format of the business cards, the vertical format. But we were also able to take this A, this symbol, and place it down here on her business card. We were able to take her name out of her logo and place it here. So you can see that we were able to create consistency. It still looks like it's a part of the same brand. It still looks like a whole, but we were able to break apart those pieces. We did the same thing for her packaging stickers. She sends client gifts. And so we were able to take the A from her logo and just break apart the symbol or icon and then the word mark we used as well. And then we incorporated a little thank you. So you can see how versatile this logo is. I have a couple more things to share with you. These were some thank you cards and just greeting cards that we created for her brand. So we used, again, the A as a stamp that she could use on the back of her envelopes to incorporate her brand. We used that alternative logo here down at the bottom of her thank you cards, and then we used her primary logo on the front of her greeting cards. And then for social media, her primary logo didn't work very well. We'd have to downsize it a lot to fit it in this area. So we just took the word mark and placed it there. So this is what, by the end of this Ellechat today, my hope is that you can create a logo or you can add to or alter your current logo that will be more versatile, that'll give you more options when you're going to put your logo on collateral items, whether it's on your Facebook cover image or your packaging stickers or your business cards, whatever it is, you need that versatility. And you don't have to sacrifice consistency to get there. So your brand, and this is what I want to reverse your thinking in a way. Your brand should be a system. Your logo needs to be versatile to account for all of the ways that your logo is going to be used. So instead of thinking of your brand, your visual brand, as your logo and your patterns and your colors and your fonts and all of these separate items that come together in a collection, I want you to think about it as a system. A system that functions to where if you need a border for something, you know the exact color that border needs to be and you know how it needs to be used. If you have an instance where you need a vertical logo or a logo that fits well in a square or a circle, you have an exact logo to use. You have parameters around it. So I want you to think of your brand as a system, and it'll really help you when you go to create these alternative logo options. So how to create alternate or alternative, I keep saying both, variations of your logo. That's what I'm going to teach you how to do today. I always like to know where we're going and give you a heads up of where we're going. So we're going to cover why you need alternative options. I just showed you that, so we've already covered that. 5 types of logos, the best uses and formats for those logos. Then I'm going to help you evaluate your current logo to maybe decide which of those 5 types you need to include in your brand. We're going to talk about some rules of composition and 5 characteristics of iconic logos. So we have a lot to cover today, but I hope that by the end of it, you'll be able to look at your logo objectively and have some action steps for how you can change it and make it more versatile and make it work for you. So first, what are the 5 types of logos that you can choose from? And the first one are symbols and icons. So I'm sure that you can quickly identify the businesses behind these symbols and logos. We have Apple, Target, the Dallas Cowboys, BP, Twitter, the Olympics, Nike, and Pepsi. We don't see any of their names here, but their symbols and these icons are so easily recognizable that we're able to know the businesses that they represent. And that's the awesome thing about icons. Now, the hard thing about icons is that you already have to have some brand recognition in order for the icons to be effective. So if you've never introduced an icon into your brand before, or you have an icon but not many people know about your brand, your visual brand, it's going to be really hard to create that connection. And I'll get to an option and a way around that in just a moment. But icons are great for many different reasons, and I'm going to go over them with you. Icons or symbols are really simple representations, and they usually pull from something you're already familiar with. So if I back up a second, you recognize Target because this icon, this symbol is meant as a bullseye. That's already recognizable to you, and the fact that Target is named Target makes sense and is really intuitive. You've seen a star before. They just stylized it a little bit different so that you would think of the Cowboys. You probably recognize some sort of organic shape here or flower to think of BP, or a bird. So they're all symbols that you're already familiar with. They've just tweaked it or stylized these symbols in some way to make them easily recognizable. Pepsi might not be as easily recognizable. It's a little more abstract, but still really simple, and a really simple representation of the brand. So they are easily recognizable, and they're really effective because there's no language barrier. So if you have a business that is global, you might consider adding a symbol because there's no language barrier there. People in China would be able to recognize it just as easily as people in the States. So symbols are really effective for that. They easily fit in circular and square formats. Icons, because they're really simple, and most of these, for the most part, will fit really well in a circle or in a square. So for profile photos, that's really helpful. For packaging stickers, there's so many instances where you need a square or circular format, and symbols can be really, really helpful for that. They also express ideas more effectively than text sometimes because visuals like icons and symbols take less time for us to process. It takes us longer to read something than it does to process the Apple logo or the Apple symbol. So they can often express ideas more effectively because they have those associations like we talked about a second ago. So if you don't have a symbol within your brand, you might consider using one. Think through the iconography that you want to represent your brand. We talked about that a little bit in last week's Ellechat on how to create icons and how to come up with concepts for icons. So if you need a refresher, that might be really helpful for you. The second type of logo is a word mark. So word marks really don't have any iconography or symbolism. They focus more on the text, and they stylize the text. Now, word marks are usually more than just taking a font and writing out the name of your business. They're usually stylized in a way, or the font itself is altered to make it more custom and more distinct. So I'm sure that you recognize the vast majority of these logos. FedEx, really simple, but the purple and the orange, and even, I don't know if some of you have noticed this before, but in the negative space between the E and the X, there's an arrow. So it's really clever. Disney, it's more of a hand-lettered, it looks more like handwriting there, which is appropriate for their audience. So you can see how each one of these are stylized to make them very distinct. There's many advantages of using word marks, especially for businesses that might be new. Word marks are really effective because it displays the whole name of your business. So there's no question as to what the business is behind that logo. They're usually really great in horizontal formats because if you look at each one of these, it's a horizontal format. Usually don't put text up and down. It's usually left to right. That's what we're all accustomed to. And like I said, including the business's name is great for recognition. But if you have a really long business name, or your business name is hard to pronounce, you can run into some issues with word marks. So you might consider a combination mark, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I have a feeling that for many of you, you either have a word mark or you have a combination mark. So the third type is a letter mark. And letter marks, pretty straightforward. They include letters. So they're like symbols or icons, but they have letters there to associate with the business name. So Coco Chanel, the Boston Red Sox, IBM, Google, Virginia Tech. I'm a Hokie. I had to put that one on there. McDonald's, Motorola, Pinterest. They all take the first letter of the business name or the first letters of the name of the brand and represent them visually. They usually stylize it a little bit or make it consistent with the typeface of the letter or the word mark rather. So you can see that they stylize it here. There's many advantages of using letter marks. It's great for really long business names or business names that are hard to pronounce, like I told you a moment ago. That's the hard part about those word marks. So if you have a really long name or multiple words in your logo, a letter mark can be really helpful. Just like symbols and icons, they fit really well in square and circular formats, and they downsize well for that very reason. You usually keep them very simple and you don't stylize them too much. It also helps because it puts equal importance or equal weight on every word in the business name. So same goes for IBM, Virginia Tech, both the V and the T are highlighted. So if you have multiple letters or multiple words in your name, that can be really helpful. And then the fourth type of logo, the one that I always highly recommend that everyone utilize, is called a combination mark. Combination mark combines, it's the best of both worlds, really. It combines a letter mark, or excuse me, a word mark. So many marks going on here. Word mark and a symbol or an icon. So you can see for the United States Postal Service, we have the word mark here, and then we also have a symbol or icon here of the eagle. For Domino's Pizza, we have the word mark, and then we have some iconography here with the dice. So you can see that across all of these different logos that I have here. And the great part about combination marks is that they provide the most versatility because you can break them apart. If I were to show you just this peacock, you would still recognize NBC, or you could just use the letter marks underneath that as well. Same with Sprint. You can break apart these different components of the logo, and it gives you a lot more versatility. So I always really recommend combination marks. And like I said, for the advantages, they're the best of both worlds. They're the most common type of logo out there. I did a post on this a few weeks ago on these 5 different types of logos. So for some of you who've read it, this will be a little refresher, but I promise there's a purpose in it. And I think it was something like 67% of the most popular brands in the world use combination marks. I'm not positive on that, but that's what's coming to mind. You can double check me. Like I said, the elements can be broken apart and used on their own, and it's the most distinct and original. These are really easy to trademark because there's so many components to a combination mark that you don't have to worry about people copying you too closely. With an icon, that can be a little difficult. With a word mark, that can be a little bit difficult. So that's important to keep in mind. If you're feeling overwhelmed about creating a combination mark, by the way, I'll be going over that in just a second, so hold tight. The 5th type is an emblem. Emblems are different from combination marks because they combine everything together. So you'll see that it has a container of sorts. And the text or the word mark or letter mark is inside of that emblem, along with some iconography. So for BMW, it works as a unit. It's a little bit harder to pull out just the BMW here. Same with Harley Davidson, UPS. They're more of a badge of sorts. And there's a couple advantages to it. I don't necessarily recommend it, especially if you don't have as much of a design background and you're trying to create a logo, like an emblem. It can be really difficult, but they're great because they are very compact and they come across as very intentional and professional. However, they're really hard to downsize because the more detailed they get, the more detail they lose when you scale these down. So that's something to definitely keep in mind if you have an emblem for your current logo. So which of these 5 logo types are you currently using? Do you have a combination mark? Do you have just a word mark? Chances are you either have a combination mark, a word mark, or a emblem, because like I said, icons and symbols or letter marks are usually harder for creating recognition. But I want you to think through, how would you identify these 5 logo types that you're currently using? If you have a word mark at the moment, you might consider creating a combination mark by incorporating a symbol or a letter mark, or you might consider taking one component of your word mark, like the O from this logo that I did for What Olivia Did. You might take just a component of it and use it on its own to create a little bit more versatility. So for What Olivia Did, it would fit okay in a square, but we wanted just one simple piece of her logo that we could use for profile pictures. And in smaller instances, that this O fit a lot better in a circle or a square than trying to pare down this already simple logo. So that might be an option for you. If you have a word mark or even a combination mark, consider what pieces you can take out of it and use on its own as an icon or a symbol. If you have a combination mark, you might break it apart into a symbol and a word mark for more versatility. So like this one for Reveille & Co., another one of my clients. We stacked a symbol and a letter mark on top of a word mark, and we were able to use these on its own. We can even use the R on its own. So you don't have to even incorporate anything new into your current logo. You can break apart those pieces. And this would work really, really well in a horizontal format. This works really well in a square or circular format. And this works really great in a vertical format. So it gives her that versatility within her brand. So consider that if you already have a combination mark. Or you might your solution might be as simple as just switching up the format. So for the top of her website, Olivia wanted a more horizontal format so she could fit more content above the fold of her website. So we just simply took the text, instead of stacking it on top of each other, we placed it side by side, and it was the same components of the logo. We just rearranged them. So if you're looking for more versatility within your brand, you might consider, like I said, pulling out one piece of it. So we just pulled out the O. You might consider switching up the format. Instead of stacking it on top of each other, you might have a horizontal format. So you can work with what you already have, based on what you already have, by just pulling different elements apart. And by keeping in mind that you're striving after a system, you're not just trying to place a collection of things together. You're working on a system for your brand. Like I just said, focus on how your logos will not focus separately and together. That was a typo on my part. Will work separately and together. So I'm always keeping that in mind when I am creating a logo for my clients. I want to think about how I can use each of those different components separately on their own, and how all those components will also function together. So with that in mind, if you're thinking about breaking your logo apart or adding in some iconography there, whatever you need to do on your part to create more versatility, I want to go over some simple design rules to make sure that those other variations, those alternate variations that you're creating, look professional and cohesive. So we're going to go over some composition rules. I already saw a question about this a moment ago, so I was excited that you all were already thinking this far ahead. For your logos, you want to create even spacing, and you want to consider negative space. Now, what I mean by even spacing, you can see this visually, and it makes sense to you. Your eye already knows that it looks good. You might just not be aware of why. So for this Christina Fox logo, you can see that this scripted font kind of curves. There's a curve here. The F of the font that I used wasn't curvy. I came back in and drew it so that it would mimic these lines in here. I wanted it to look like a puzzle piece, like Christina and Fox were meant to fit together this way. And so I wanted equal spacing between a lot of these elements. So I wanted equal spacing here. It's not perfect, but you can see this kind of line and space that's happening there. Same thing for the spacing on these little elements here. You want to consider the spacing around it. You want it to fit like a puzzle piece. A way that you can make your logo look very amateur and very DIY is not considering how the spacing between the elements of your logo. Also considering the negative space in your logo. What does it look like around here? Your eye really likes to see things like puzzle pieces and equal spacing. So really keep that in mind. And you can get really clever, like I showed you just a moment ago with this FedEx logo. You can get really clever with the negative space in here. A lot of people don't recognize that, but then once you do recognize it, you see it every time. But just equal spacing between the letters. You can see how here the spacing in the swoops just makes sense. So keep that in mind. That goes into second rule of composition, which is balance. And I just showed you that with the swoops of the Coca-Cola logo. There was balance, and I'll go back up, hopping around a lot. There was balance. There was a swoop here in the bottom left hand and a swoop here in the top right hand corner. So that created some balance in the logo. It didn't feel too heavy on one side rather than the other side. Jeep, it works well too because you have the J extending up and the P extending down. That creates balance. So it's important to consider these things as you're creating your logos and your logo variations. For here, we had the P swooping up and the E swooping this way. So it created great balance there. We also had, moving things around. We also had some balance created by stacking these and having alignment. So those are things to consider when you're creating your logo variations. And then alignment too. Especially if you're working in Adobe Illustrator, it is extremely easy to use those alignment tools and make sure the spacing is exact. You may think that you can eyeball it, but it might end up looking a little strange if you try to do it based on what looks good to you and you're not using precise measurements. So make sure that everything, as best as you can, aligns vertically and horizontally. So those are just some simple rules of composition to measure your logos against. But I also have 5 characteristics of iconic logos, and I mentioned some of these in this week's newsletter. These are also measures. So once you have decided what types of logos you want to incorporate in your brand and you're thinking through what elements you can pull out and use on their own, measure them up against these characteristics. This will ensure that you have a brand that lasts and logos that last for years instead of just months before you go to switch it up again. The first is simplicity. I think people have a tendency to over-design or overthink things. They want to add things to their designs. But the most effective designs are simple. So for example, this logo is for the Food Writers Guild. Now it makes sense because it looks like a calligraphy nib, which plays off of the writer part of their brand. But if you look in the negative space, and this goes to show you how you can use negative space effectively, they place the silhouette of a spoon because it's the Food Writers Guild. So it's not a super complicated concept, and they didn't carry it out in a super stylized way, but it's really simple. And because it's simple, it works as a really good icon and simple. You can downsize it. It's not going to lose any of its detail. It looks great big and it looks great small. So focus on simple. Less is more when it comes to logos. You do want your logo to be distinct, but you don't have to make it. You don't have to create distinction by adding more. Sometimes it's even more in the concept than anything else. So think through that as you're coming up with logo options. I remember one of my professors saying that the best logos, especially when it comes to symbols and icons, can be drawn from memory. So if I told you to draw the McDonald's logo or the McDonald's letter mark, you could easily draw that logo on a piece of paper. Or if I asked you to draw the Apple logo, you could easily draw that. So think about that as you're creating your logo, especially for your symbols and your icons. The second characteristic of an iconic logo is relevance. I love this logo for the Silly Goose restaurant in Nashville. I don't think it's even there anymore. But it's so appropriate for the type of food that they serve, for the atmosphere of the restaurant, and for the location. It's in Nashville. This may not look quite right if it was in the Hamptons or something like that. So you have to think about relevance. Is your logo, are these variations that you're coming up with, are they relevant for your audience? You might not choose pink if you're an accountant, because pink is associated as a feminine color. You want to choose a color that's stable. You might not choose script if you're an accountant. So you want to think about how relevant your logo is, the colors that you're choosing are. For this one, it's extremely relevant. You can tell it doesn't take itself too seriously, and that the name Silly Goose shows that too. So it is a perfect match. So ask yourself, is your logo appropriate for your industry? Is it appropriate for your target audience? Whether it's even your primary logo, but especially those logo variations that you're creating, are they appropriate? The fourth characteristic of an iconic logo is tradition. And when I went to create my own logo, because I know that creating your own logo is 1,000 times harder than designing a logo for anyone else. But the one thing that I really wanted to be mindful of when I was creating the Ellen Company logo is that I wanted it to last me for years. Because I knew that if I started to develop recognition with my brand, and as my audience grew, I couldn't make big changes later on. I wanted this to stick for a long time. So I didn't go crazy with details. I kept it just very simple and clean. I think if you go a trendy route with your logo, you're going to be really disappointed later on because trends come and go. So if you're using the Bombshell font, script font, you might want to find something else because that one is being used a lot by, or has been in the past. It doesn't seem like, it seems like people have grown out of it. But again, that just goes to show, a year or two ago, Bombshell was a popular font. Everybody was using it, and now no one's using it. So don't go for what's trendy or what you're seeing everyone else do, but think about what is going to last 5 years from now. Is it still going to look good? That's what you're going for. With all of these logo variations, you don't want them to last just for a couple months. You want them to last for years. You want to use this over and over and over again to create that recognition with your audience. And even with the Ellen Company logo, I knew that I could use this icon by itself. So I gave myself some versatility there at the outset. So keep that in mind. Tradition. Is your logo timeless? Are the options you're coming up with, are they timeless too? The fourth characteristic of an iconic logo is distinction. Like I said a moment ago, you don't want your logo to blend in with everybody else's. You don't want it to be trendy. You want it to stand out. That's one of the hugest advantages and benefits of developing a brand is distinction. You don't want it to blend in. So for the Great Catering Company, I think this logo is so brilliant. They did food splatters, and they did all kinds of it. This is just the purple variation. They had greens and oranges and all sorts of bright colors, which gave them versatility. They can use this word mark by itself. They can use the splatters elsewhere in their brand, but I thought that this was so clever and so distinct. It still downsizes really well. There are some details in here because this is watercolor. It's meant to look like a food splatter, but it's not the important details that even if you downsize it, you're still getting the overall gist of what they're going for. So think about how these different elements of your logo create distinction. And then the fifth characteristic is scalability. I mentioned this in this week's newsletter, but it's really important that your logo looks really great when it's huge, but it also looks really great when it's scaled down. Like I said a moment ago, this little floral design that I incorporated into the Bullis photography brand, there are some details there, but they aren't lost. You still get the same gist if you size it down. And the rule of thumb that I shared in the newsletter, which is a common rule of thumb across all logos, and this is what we're taught in design school, is that if you're losing the important details, if it's sized less than an inch, then you need to reconsider. So it needs to look great blown up on a billboard, but it also needs to look really great on a clothing tag or a favicon or something of that nature. I also knew that we could use this B as a letter mark by itself as well. So consider that as you're creating your different variations for your logos. Does it scale well? And this also goes along with the simplicity one. Simplicity and scalability tend to go hand in hand. I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but the recording to this is all of these recordings for the Ellechat are posted on the website, so you can refer back to it again and again and use these standards to measure your new logo variations against. So does your logo measure up? Are you sitting here thinking, man, I need to just start all over? Or are you really excited about some options that you came up with based on those 5 different types of logos? Do you have some ideas in mind? What are you thinking at this point? I know I can't see the comments at this moment, but I will in a second, and I'd love to hear. What are you thinking? And if your logo doesn't measure up, or if you do want to add these variations, how are you going to make the necessary changes? For a lot of you, you were telling me that you designed your logo yourself. So what program did you design it in? How did you go about designing it? If you didn't create your own logo and now you want to go create some logo variations, how are you going to do that? Today, I opened registration for my Adobe Illustrator course. And this course, it's the 4th time that I'm offering it. And it's probably my most favorite course to teach. And it seems to be attendees' favorite course as well. And it just walks you through how to use Adobe Illustrator. How to use them, not only how to use Adobe Illustrator, but how can you use the tools in Adobe Illustrator for your blog or for your business to create custom one-of-a-kind graphics. So in Illustrator, and the reason I love it so much, this is the Illustrator window here, is that you can go in and the possibilities are endless. So for example, I started with this logo for the Woven Press, who's one of my most recent clients. So you guys are getting a sneak peek into their brand. We started here, and then we needed some logo variations. I needed a variation that would work well as a symbol or an icon or a letter mark. And easily in Illustrator, I was able to break apart these different elements and the type and create a mark here. And then I decided to put it on different backgrounds and switch up the color palettes. So Illustrator made it really easy for me to do that, but it not only for logos and for this part of your brand, but also for inspiration boards and coming up with inspiration boards, whether it's for your clients or for your own business. I use it to create all of these slides each week. And it's really great because I have a simple template and I can go in and easily switch out colors. It saves me a lot of time going and put all the information. I use it for advertisements on Twitter, especially. Every time I put something new in the library, I simply come in here, add what it is to that little folder, and change up the text, and Illustrator makes it really easy to do that. Same thing for the newsletter. Each week I come up with a different graphic, and so I use Illustrator for that too. So if you're thinking, how in the world am I going to create an alternate logo? I don't know what I'm doing. That's what this class is for. It's to walk you through how to use Illustrator for your blog or for your business not only to develop your brand, but to put your brand on all the different touch points between you and your audience. So whether it's blog graphics or newsletter headers or your business cards, you can do it all in one program, which is really great. There's only 2 days open for registration. So today is the first day and tomorrow is the second day. It's going to end at 11:59 tomorrow night Eastern Standard Time. So you have some time still, but this is the only time I'm going to be offering this course for 2016. So if you're considering it, I won't be offering it again in the summer or the fall. You'll have to wait until 2017 to join in on this course. It's $250, but it is well worth it. I have some more information. If you click on Learn how to use Adobe Illustrator, the button right below this video on Crowdcast, you can see more information about why Adobe Illustrator in the first place, some FAQs. You can see each module there, and you can also see some feedback from previous Adobe Illustrator Basics students and how it really helped their business. So yes, but now I want to answer your questions about logos. So you guys have probably been leaving even more. I'm going to stop sharing my screen with you. I'm back. Wow, the poll was up and 23 of you designed your own logo. That is, I mean, that's incredible, especially when only 2 of you worked with the designer and 2 of you purchased your logo from Creative Market. That is wild. So awesome. Disney font is based on Walt Disney's signature. That's what I thought, Kim, but I didn't want to throw that out there and then be wrong. So thank you for saying that. Looks like some of you have a combination mark. You have a letter mark. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and start answering some of these questions that you all have started asking. So let's get started on those. Katie asks, can you talk us through getting fonts and vectors for logos? Free versus purchasing, license versus extended license. Also, what are your favorite sites for getting fonts? My go-to site for getting fonts, and this is just personal preference, there are several out there, is myfonts.com. And usually when you go to purchase a font, even if it's a free font, you can go on the website and look and see what the licensing restrictions are. So whether it's only for personal use or if you can use it for logos and that sort of thing, I would highly, highly recommend checking on that just to be sure. Usually you can use, if you purchase a font, you're able to use it. You're able to use it for your logos, but it's really good to go and check. So great question, but myfonts.com, and I know that they have the licensing information on there. Vanessa asks, how do you determine what type of logo variations you need? How many options should you have? You don't have to have every type of logo. Like I said, usually a combination mark with either a symbol or a letter mark, and then definitely a word mark as well. Like Amanda Jameson's that I showed you right at the beginning of the Ellechat. You can break one combination mark and you can rearrange that one too. I wouldn't go overboard. You do want to create brand recognition, but just enough so that every type of format, whether it's horizontal or square or circular, is accounted for, so that when you go to implement it on business cards and other collateral items, you're good to go. What is the legality of using fonts in a logo? Nancy asks. So I think we already got that covered, but if I didn't answer something about that you wanted more clarification on, feel free to ask another question, Nancy. Chris asks, if you're starting a new company, isn't it better to use your original logo and your collateral items, website, social media, etc., instead of the variations? Don't you think your audience needs to memorize your new brand first, and then you start to use some symbols and variations? That's another great question. I think for the front of your business cards, you should definitely use a combination mark or a word mark if you're just starting out. People, like you said, aren't going to have that recognition with a symbol or an icon. But those symbols and icons also come in handy, like I said, for packaging, or even if it's on Facebook, usually they'll have the business name and then they'll have a photo. You could still put your icon there and start creating recognition. So if your business name is going to be placed along with that icon or that symbol, then that comes in handy as well and helps create that recognition. It's going to take you a while for people to start to realize. I always wonder if people would recognize the little ampersand for Ellen Company, but usually I use my primary logo. Variations are usually used in instances where your primary logo isn't the best fit. So the format of your primary logo may not work well in other instances. I wouldn't go crazy with your logo variations, but they are there when your primary logo may not be the best option. But great question, Chris. Thank you for leaving it. Bree says, I would love some insight on general spacing guidelines between logo and text itself, or if just using your visual intuition that it looks balanced is ultimately your judgment call. Sometimes it is visual, but I would say whatever spacing you decide, to keep it consistent. I think even more than having a specific number of spacing, whether it's pixels or whatever else, I would say consistency is key. So if you have three different components of your logo, you'd probably want equal spacing between each one. A lot of it is visual, but there are some design principles there. So like I talked about with composition, alignment and spacing, just make sure that it's even and consistent across all the components of your logo. Great question. Is it legal to sell logo templates with fonts, or, for example, from Creative Market? It depends on Creative Markets. They might have some standards for that you might want to look into, Rachel. I know that a lot of people do it, so I haven't personally done that. I usually create custom logos. But yes, I think it depends on, overall, yes, it just depends on which sites you're using, and you'll want to read their restrictions and their guidelines. But yes, it's definitely legal. Just make sure the fonts you're using too, like I said a moment ago, you want to go and look at the legalities of those fonts. But yeah, great question. Kelly says, how do you develop variations when you want to sometimes incorporate a tagline? Also, if you have color variations and logo variations, is that too much? Great question. You guys have awesome questions today. How do you develop variations when you want to sometimes incorporate a tagline? I would create a variation with that tagline. So, for example, I'm thinking mainly of your website header. You might want to create your primary logo with that tagline underneath it. With the Ellen Company logo, I always struggle to have a tagline, to be honest with it. It's one thing that I didn't consider because there's no baseline. So there is, but the ampersand cuts down below, and so it's always really funny with spacing. It doesn't look quite right, and the negative space doesn't look quite right. Anyway, I would create a variation with that tagline underneath it and only use it in certain instances where you need it. I wouldn't create a bunch of different logo variations with the tagline. But again, it depends. It depends on what your tagline is too. And if you have color variations and logo variations, is that too much? I would create one primary color palette for your logos. And usually I'll create one primary color palette for a logo, and then with the symbols or letter marks or something like that, I'll do a couple different color options on different backgrounds. But remember, I talked about your brand working as a system. So for things like colors, you'll want to make sure, like on a white background, this is the color that we would use for the logo. On an off-white background, this is the color that we would use for a logo. The one that keeps coming to mind, and probably one of my favorite brands that I've designed, is for Jen Neal Photography. And if you go back, and it's even on the blog, you can see how I took into account on a navy blue background, her logo is going to be gold. But on a lighter blue background, her logo is going to be dark navy. So it worked as that system. So I would come up with that system even for your logos. I wouldn't go too crazy on color variations unless it's something like symbols or icons. All right, we breezed through today. We had a lot of really great questions. Let's see, Lilith asks a question in the comments. She says, when it comes to creating printables and such, what are the advantages of Illustrator over InDesign? Great question. InDesign is great for layouts. So if you're doing a magazine, if you're doing multiple page documents, you can use InDesign, and it's going to be really helpful for creating kind of a template and guidelines for all of your documents. However, within Illustrator, you can still do multiple page documents because there are multiple artboards. But in InDesign, you can't easily create or draw icons or logos or that sort of thing. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for layouts. But Illustrator is pretty much all in one. So while Illustrator wasn't designed for layouts, and if you're really particular with layouts, then you might want to go with InDesign. But when it comes to logo design, icons, headers, basically anything under the sun, Illustrator incorporates it. And that's why I focus mainly on Illustrator, because it's an all-in-one tool. I don't think that, especially if you're not a designer, if you're a creative business owner, I don't think you should have to learn every design program under the sun. I really love Illustrator because it's just one, and you can still do layout design and graphics and everything else that you need. So great question. All right, let's see. I don't think there's any other questions in there. I would really encourage you, I'm going to jump off a few minutes early since we don't have any more questions. Next week, I'm having Paul Jarvis on the Ellechat to talk about mailing lists. Paul is the genius behind the creative class. He has a really great newsletter each week, the weekly dispatches or the Sunday dispatches. And he's really great at not only building his list, but keeping up with his list and managing it. I know everyone's talking about mailing lists. We're going to talk about why you should worry about a mailing list in the first place, how you can utilize it, and how you can keep it organized if you have people opting in from different places. So it's going to be great. If you aren't familiar with Paul Jarvis, you need to go look him up right now. He's probably one of my very favorite creatives in the industry, and I'm really excited that he'll be joining us. So again, mark your calendars for Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll get the registration going for next week's Ellechat. I think even if you click on my face, I think it might be in the top left corner, or click on my account. My screen looks different than your screen. If you click on it, you can see next week's Ellechat. You can go ahead and register, be one of the first to register. Again, just as a reminder, Adobe Illustrator, if you want to learn how to use it, there's only 150 seats, and they've been going really quickly today. I need to check and see how many are left. Tomorrow's the last day of registration, and this is the only time it's going to be offered in 2016. So I would love for you to join me in there. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope to see you in next week's Ellechat. Bye, guys.